What if some of the worst box office failures of 2026 were actually better than the year's biggest hits? Hollywood spent fortunes selling familiar brands, strange experiments, and hopeful new franchises, only to watch audiences stay home. Today we are counting down 18 outright flops and painful underperformers that may have failed financially, yet still deserve one honest chance from movie fans. Before we expose the first expensive failure, hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications. Number 18. The Moment, 2026. Picture a pop star at the height of her fame, surrounded by people who claim to understand her while quietly turning her personality into a product. That is the uncomfortable joke at the center of this strange mockumentary. Charli XCX plays an exaggerated version of herself during the wild success of her fictional concert era, but the celebration quickly becomes a corporate trap. Managers, filmmakers, sponsors, and executives keep pushing her toward a safer image while insisting every decision is being made for her benefit. The most memorable material arrives when a supposedly artistic concert film begins changing into a giant advertisement. Charli watches meetings about her own identity as if she is the least important person in the room. Alexander Skarsgård adds to the madness as a filmmaker whose grand creative speeches hide how little he understands the artist he is directing. The awkward rehearsals and increasingly ridiculous branding discussions are funny, but they also reveal how quickly rebellion can be packaged and sold. Financially, the experiment barely made an impression. Its domestic total remained under $4 million, while reports placed its production cost near $4 million before marketing. That does not make it the year's largest monetary disaster, but it does make it one of the most ignored, critically discussed releases. Number 17. Nirvana the Band, The Show the Movie, 2026. Two hopeless musicians still want only one thing: to perform at Toronto's Rivoli Club. Unfortunately, Matt and Jay have no real plan, no useful connections, and almost no ability to understand when an idea has become dangerous or completely ridiculous. Their newest attempt involves an elaborate stunt connected to Toronto landmarks, an old recreational vehicle, and what they believe is a fake time machine. Then the impossible happens. The vehicle throws them back to 2008. Instead of behaving like responsible time travelers, the pair immediately begin treating the past as another opportunity to promote their band. Their mission remains wonderfully small, even while the story becomes enormous. They are not trying to save the planet. They simply want a booking at a local venue. That contrast gives the movie its unusual charm. One standout sequence involves the friends testing what they can change without destroying the future. Their confidence grows after every tiny success, even though the audience can clearly see disaster approaching. The time travel effects are far more convincing than anyone familiar with the series might expect, which makes the foolish behavior occurring inside them even funnier. Critics responded with remarkable enthusiasm. The film earned near-universal positive reviews, with praise directed toward its inventive filmmaking, enormous laughs, and ability to welcome viewers who had never watched the original web series. Yet domestic ticket sales remained close to $4 million. Already disagree with the ranking? Tell us which overlooked movie deserves a second chance in the comments. And if you enjoy honest movie breakdowns, like this video, and subscribe before the next financial disaster begins. Number 16. Tuner, 2026. A quiet piano technician might seem like the last person criminals would recruit for a difficult job. However, Nicky possesses an unusual ability. His hearing is so precise that he can identify tiny differences in sound that almost everyone else misses. He spends his days working beside an experienced tuner named Harry, played by Dustin Hoffman, carefully adjusting instruments for wealthy clients who rarely notice the skill involved. Everything changes when a forgotten safe combination creates an unexpected opportunity. By listening to the internal clicks of the lock, Nicky discovers that the same gift used to tune pianos can also open secured doors. What begins as curiosity soon attracts people who see his talent as a profitable weapon. The film's best sequence does not depend on a loud explosion or a giant chase. Nicky simply places his ear near a safe and turns the dial, while every minor sound becomes enormous. The camera studies his concentration as the outside world almost disappears. That scene explains both his brilliance and his weakness. Once he focuses on a puzzle, he struggles to recognize the danger surrounding it. With a domestic gross of roughly $4.5 million, the movie never found the broad audience suggested by its recognizable cast and polished crime story presentation. Yet critics frequently praised Leo Woodall's restrained performance, the intelligent humor, and the way the film mixes romance, class tension, crime, and character drama. Rather than presenting Nicky as an instant criminal genius, The story allows him to remain nervous, conflicted, and emotionally inexperienced. His choices feel less like the actions of an action hero and more like the mistakes of a young man who finally discovers something at which he is exceptional. Viewers expecting constant excitement may find its pace gentle, but anyone who enjoys clever, character-driven thrillers should listen closely. Number 15. Dead Man's Wire, 2026. A furious homeowner walks into a mortgage company carrying a plan that forces an entire city to pay attention. Inspired by the real Tony Kiritsis case, Gus Van Sant's tense period drama follows a desperate man who takes a company executive captive using a dangerous wire-controlled device. He demands money, an apology, and public recognition that the system treated him unfairly. Bill Skarsgård plays the central figure as more than a simple villain. His behavior is frightening and unpredictable, but the film also shows the humiliation and financial pressure that brought him to this moment. Around him, police officers, reporters, lawyers, and company representatives attempt to control a situation that keeps becoming more public. The strongest stretch occurs when the pair must move through the streets while cameras and frightened onlookers surround them. Every step could change the outcome. The scene feels almost unreal, but its strange theatrical quality reflects the actual media circus that developed around the case. Al Pacino, Coleman Domingo, and Cary Elwes deepen the story by representing different institutions trying to shape the public narrative. Critics embrace the film's nervous energy, dark humor, 1970s atmosphere, and anger towards systems that protect powerful organizations. The financial result was far less impressive. Against a reported $15 million production budget, worldwide earnings remained below $4 million. Number 14. Mother Mary, 2026. Behind the perfect costumes and carefully designed performances, a famous singer appears to be losing control of the identity everyone expects her to maintain. Anne Hathaway plays Mother Mary, a global pop superstar preparing for a major comeback after an onstage incident leaves her frightened, uncertain, and convinced that something from her past is following her. Her solution is to contact Sam Anselm, a gifted costume designer and former lover, played by Michaela Coel. Mary asks Sam to create the dress that will define her return. However, the clothing assignment quickly becomes an emotional confrontation. Old arguments resurface, hidden motives appear, and each fitting session begins to feel like an attempt to rebuild, or punish, the person standing in front of the mirror. The standout moment occurs during a private costume fitting when the glamorous performer can no longer hide behind assistants, lights, or choreography. Mary and Sam study the dress, but they are really studying each other. The silence between them says more than the dialogue, allowing Hathaway and Cole to turn fabric, posture, and eye contact into a battle. Its unusual mixture of pop melodrama, psychological mystery, music, and fashion proved difficult to sell. Reports placed the budget near $20 million, while the theatrical return remained below $3 million. Critics were not completely united, but the overall response leaned positive, especially toward the performances, visual design, and ambition. Number 13. I Love Boosters, 2026. A group of stylish shoplifters decides to target a fashion empire built by someone they believe stole ideas from people with less power. That wild setup allows director Boots Riley to turn a crime comedy into a bright, angry attack on consumer culture. Keke Palmer leads the Velvet Gang, whose members move through luxury stores with the confidence of performers stepping onto a stage. Their enemy is a celebrated fashion figure played by Demi Moore. She sells expensive rebellion to wealthy customers, while quietly benefiting from other people's creativity. The gang's plan begins as revenge, but it soon grows into something stranger, riskier, and much larger than stealing clothing. The movie's unforgettable chase refuses to behave like a normal chase. Bodies, buildings, and movement seem to follow cartoon rules as the gang races through a distorted city. At one point, the environment appears tilted, as if the entire capitalist world has physically lost its balance. That visual madness will either delight viewers or make them wonder whether the film has completely escaped its own control. Its failure is easy to explain. The satire is aggressive, the world is surreal, and the movie constantly changes tone. It does not gently invite the audience into its argument. It grabs viewers by the jacket and pulls them through a broken shopping mall. Yet that fearless personality is also why it deserves attention. Safe studio comedies often disappear from memory within weeks. This one risks being irritating, messy, and excessive because it actually has something to say. You may not agree with every idea, but you will probably remember the Velvet Gang long after dozens of more profitable movies have faded. Number 12. Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, 2026. Late one night, a nervous stranger enters a Los Angeles diner and announces that humanity is about to lose a war against artificial intelligence. That should be enough to make everyone leave. Instead, the customers slowly realize that the man may actually be telling the truth. Sam Rockwell plays a time traveler who claims he has attempted this mission more than 100 times. Each failure sends him back to the beginning, forcing him to recruit another group of ordinary people and try again. His newest team includes diner customers carrying their own problems, regrets, and reasons to distrust him. The funniest and most revealing sequence comes when he attempts to explain the plan as quickly as possible. He knows every objection before anyone raises it because he has heard the conversation during previous attempts. What sounds like brilliant prediction is really exhausted repetition. Rockwell turns the moment into comedy, while allowing viewers to see how badly endless failure has damaged the character. The mission eventually expands beyond the diner, but the film keeps returning to the idea that saving the world may require people who do not feel important. Their personal stories become pieces of the larger puzzle, creating a mixture of science fiction, comedy, drama, and controlled chaos. Perhaps the title sounded too strange. Perhaps viewers believed they had already seen enough stories about artificial intelligence and time loops. But this is not a cold lecture about technology. It is a warm, frantic story about loneliness, repetition, and the possibility that damaged people can still become useful to one another. The film is messy, yet its mess feels alive. That is more than can be said for many perfectly organized blockbusters. Number 11, The Invite, 2026. One dinner between two married couples begins with wine, polite conversation, and the kind of careful smiles people use when they are hiding something. Then the hosts introduce an unconventional relationship proposal that changes the atmosphere instantly. What follows is not simply a romantic comedy. It becomes a painful examination of jealousy, honesty, curiosity, resentment, and the private rules couples create to keep their lives stable. Olivia Wilde and Seth Rogen play one troubled pair, while Penelope Cruz and Edward Norton portray the confident neighbors who appear to have solved every marital problem. That confidence slowly begins to crack. The visitors are not as secure as they pretend, and the hosts are not as unhappy as they initially believe. Much of the film takes place inside a Boston apartment, turning ordinary rooms into emotional traps. The most effective sequence begins as a funny conversation around the table before small questions become direct accusations. Characters change seats, alliances shift, and the same people who were laughing minutes earlier suddenly understand that the evening may permanently alter their relationships. Unlike several films on this list, this was not a gigantic studio loss. Its modest reported budget and worldwide earnings around the high $20 million range may eventually place it closer to a small success. However, its theatrical reach remained surprisingly limited compared with the extraordinary critical response, making it one of the year's clearest examples of a celebrated film that mainstream audiences barely discussed. The result feels like a stage play that gradually becomes too emotionally dangerous for the stage. It will not satisfy viewers seeking spectacle, but anyone who enjoys watching talented actors politely destroy one another should accept this invitation. Number 10. The Death of Robin Hood, 2026. Forget the cheerful outlaw who steals from the rich, laughs with his companions, and fires perfect arrows through the forest. This version meets Robin near the end of his life. He is tired, badly injured, and forced to confront the difference between the heroic legend people repeat and the violent choices he actually made. Hugh Jackman plays the aging outlaw as a man carrying years of regret. After a final confrontation leaves him vulnerable, he receives help from a mysterious woman played by Jodie Comer. Their conversations slowly reveal that Robin's greatest opponent may not be a sheriff, a king, or an army. It may be his own memory. The movie's defining sequence arrives during a brutal forest encounter where the familiar symbols of the legend appear stripped of romance. Mud replaces shining castles. Exhaustion replaces playful sword fighting. Robin moves like a person who has survived too many stories about himself. Director Michael Sarnowski treats every movement as if the legend is physically collapsing around the man. The slow pace and mournful tone probably worked against it. Audiences who saw Robin Hood in the title may have expected a large adventure. Instead, they received something closer to a funeral for adventure itself. That is precisely why the movie deserves another look. It does not attempt to launch a universe or redesign the character for younger viewers. It asks what happens after a man has spent his life becoming a symbol. The answer is quiet, painful, and far more mature than the marketing suggested. Number 9. Shelter, 2026. Living alone has allowed Michael Mason to bury the dangerous life he once knew. Jason Statham plays the isolated protector, with his usual physical confidence, but the early scenes emphasize routine rather than action. He has created a small world where nobody asks questions, and every day looks exactly like the one before it. That peace ends when a young girl enters his life and brings powerful enemies with her. Mason must decide whether remaining hidden is more important than protecting someone who has nowhere else to go. Naturally, the decision pulls him back toward the skills he wanted to abandon. The film's central action sequence transforms Mason's remote shelter into a battlefield. Doors, narrow hallways, improvised tools, and limited space force him to think, rather than simply overpower everyone. The scene works because the location has already been presented as his safe place. Watching that security collapse gives the action emotional weight. Worldwide earnings reached only the mid-$50 million range against a reported production cost close to $50 million. Once marketing and theater shares are considered, that result left little room for profit. Competition from other releases, and the feeling that audiences had seen Statham play similar characters, probably limited its impact. Nobody should expect Shelter to reinvent the action genre. Its strengths are smaller. Statham knows how to communicate regret through silence, and the film allows him to build trust with the child before the major confrontations begin. That preparation matters. Without it, the fights would be empty movement. With it, every decision becomes an attempt to preserve the fragile family Mason never expected to find. This was a financial disappointment, but for viewers who appreciate direct, well-constructed action stories, it provides a stronger home than its box office numbers imply. Number 8. Greenland 2. Migration, 2026. Surviving the end of the world was only the beginning. Years after a comet shattered civilization, John Garrity, his wife Allison, and their son are still living beneath the ground with other survivors. The bunker protected them from the first disaster, but food, air, and human patience cannot last forever. When conditions become impossible, the family must leave safety behind and cross the remains of Europe in search of somewhere life can begin again. Gerard Butler and Morena Baccarin return, but the sequel does not treat them as fearless explorers. They are exhausted parents trying to keep their family together while every road, settlement, and stranger could represent either hope or another threat. That grounded approach separates the film from disaster stories that care more about collapsing landmarks than the people running beneath them. One of the largest sequences follows the survivors across broken infrastructure while the environment begins failing around them. The spectacle is impressive, but the scene works because the family becomes separated within the confusion. Butler is not trying to stop a comet. He is desperately searching through dust, noise, and frightened crowds for the people he promised to protect. The production reportedly cost around $90 million, while global earnings stalled below $50 million. Those numbers made the sequel one of the year's clearest financial disappointments. The long gap after the original film, limited enthusiasm for another post-disaster story, and an expensive theatrical market all contributed to the result. For audiences who enjoyed the emotional seriousness of the first Greenland, Migration offers a harsher second chapter. The world is larger, the journey is longer, and the box office impact was far smaller than the studio needed. Yet as a story about rebuilding after the spectacular destruction has ended, it remains more thoughtful than the financial collapse surrounding it. Number 7. Crime 101, 2026. Along the Pacific coast, a skilled jewel thief has built his reputation by treating every robbery like a mathematical problem. Mike, played by Chris Hemsworth, studies traffic patterns, security routines, human habits, and escape routes. He avoids unnecessary attention and believes discipline has kept him alive. Then one damaged operation places him in the path of people who do not share his rules. After being injured during a robbery, Mike begins thinking about retirement. Unfortunately, another crime is blamed on him before he can disappear. A persistent detective, played by Mark Ruffalo, sees a pattern connecting several carefully planned thefts, while a reckless criminal, portrayed by Barry Keoghan, makes the situation increasingly unstable. Halle Berry enters the story as an insurance specialist who understands the stolen objects and may understand Mike better than he expects. The opening highway robbery establishes the film's personality. Instead of presenting the thieves as noisy invaders, the sequence unfolds through timing, observation, and controlled movement. Cars continue traveling while the crime takes place almost invisibly among them. Later, a tense conversation between Hemsworth and Ruffalo becomes just as exciting as the robbery, because both men recognize that the other is hiding important information. With a reported production budget near $90 million and global earnings below $75 million, Crime 101 needed far more attention than it received. The adult cast was impressive, but the film lacked superheroes, a familiar franchise, or an easy concept that could be explained in one explosive trailer. The story belongs to an older tradition of Los Angeles crime films in which the city is not simply a background. Highways, glass buildings, ocean views, and expensive neighborhoods become part of the criminal machinery. Everyone is chasing security, yet every decision makes security less possible. Its greatest achievement is making competence interesting. Mike is good at what he does, but the film understands that a person can construct the perfect plan and still misunderstand another human being. That mistake creates the real suspense. Number 6. 28 years later. The Bone Temple, 2026. Decades after infection destroyed ordinary British life, survival has developed its own religions, rituals, and monsters. The Bone Temple continues the story without pretending the greatest danger comes only from the infected. Human beings have adapted to the ruined world, but some of those adaptations are more disturbing than the disease itself. Ralph Fiennes returns as Dr. Kelson, whose strange monument made from human remains represents both remembrance and obsession. Elsewhere, a violent group shaped by the mysterious Jimmy creates a new form of control through performance, fear, and loyalty. Jack O'Connell brings unsettling charisma to the expanding mythology, while connections to the original outbreak gradually become clearer. The most discussed sequence places Kelson inside the Bone Temple as music, firelight, and frightening movement transform the location into something between a sanctuary and a stage. Fiennes plays the scene with unexpected tenderness. The surroundings are horrifying, yet the character behaves as though he is trying to preserve evidence that these people once had names and lives. The financial story was much darker. A reported cost above $60 million was met with worldwide earnings below that amount. Because theaters retain part of ticket revenue, and advertising adds millions more, simply approaching the production budget was nowhere near enough. The release may have arrived too quickly after the previous installment. Some casual viewers were also uncertain about whether this was a direct sequel, a separate story, or another reboot. Horror audiences showed interest, but not at the level required by such an expensive production. Still, the film is worth watching because it refuses to become a routine chase. Its real subject is the culture that grows after catastrophe. Graves become architecture. Fear becomes leadership. Memory becomes a survival tool. Number 5. The Bride, 2026. In 1930s Chicago, Frankenstein's lonely creation asks for the one thing his maker never gave him: companionship. Christian Bale plays the famous creature, now called Frank, as a powerful but emotionally unfinished man. He seeks help from the unconventional Dr. Euphronius, who finds a dead young woman and brings her back to life. Jessie Buckley's reanimated bride does not awaken as a quiet companion waiting to serve someone else's story. She enters the world furious, curious, impulsive, and determined to decide what her second life should become. Frank wants connection, but he quickly discovers that creating, or reviving, someone does not give him ownership over her choices. From there, the pair moves through Chicago, attracting police attention and accidentally inspiring a social movement. The Bride becomes a symbol for people who feel ignored, controlled, or defined by others. Meanwhile, the romantic connection between the two creatures remains unstable because each wants something different from the relationship. Warner Brothers reportedly spent around $80 million on the production, although some estimates moved even higher. Worldwide ticket sales remained under $25 million. That enormous gap made The Bride one of the most visible failures of the year. The movie's disorder is real. It combines horror, romance, crime, musical energy, social satire, and punk rebellion. At times, those pieces fight rather than cooperate. Yet the chaos reflects the bride herself. She has been pushed into existence and immediately surrounded by people explaining what she is supposed to become. That makes the financial failure strangely appropriate. The Bride was too expensive, too unruly, and too difficult to market. It did not politely enter the marketplace. It kicked open the laboratory door and demanded attention. Number 4. Disclosure Day, 2026. For generations, governments have hidden evidence that humanity is not alone. Then one man decides that 7 billion people deserve to know the truth at the same time. Steven Spielberg's return to large-scale science fiction begins not with an invasion, but with information. Josh O'Connor plays a figure connected to the secret who believes continued silence is more dangerous than public panic. Emily Blunt becomes central to the attempt to control, or expose, the disclosure, while political leaders, scientists, ordinary families, and military officials prepare for a revelation nobody can fully predict. The film's most powerful sequence is the worldwide broadcast. Screens activate in homes, stores, train stations, hospitals, and public squares. People initially assume they are watching another political announcement. Then an image appears that cannot be explained away. Spielberg avoids turning the moment into immediate chaos. He stays on faces, disbelief, fear, wonder, and the realization that every religion, government, and personal argument now exists inside a much larger universe. That patient human focus earned considerable critical respect. Reviews praised the performances, classical visual storytelling, emotional sincerity, and the director's continued ability to present discovery through ordinary people rather than endless technical explanations. Financially, the description flop requires some caution. Disclosure Day earned far more than several movies on this countdown and reportedly reached more than twice its production cost worldwide. However, a budget around $115 million, enormous global advertising, and premium expectations meant the result was treated as an underperformance rather than the major event the studio hoped to launch. It survived, but it did not dominate. Number 3. Star Wars: The Mandalorian and Grogu, 2026. After years of carrying Star Wars television, Din Djarin and Grogu finally moved onto cinema screens. The transition appeared safe. The characters were popular, the universe was familiar, and audiences already understood the emotional connection between the armored warrior and his tiny Force-sensitive companion. The movie follows the pair as they accept a dangerous assignment connected to the New Republic. What begins as another professional mission quickly reveals a larger threat developing in the shadows left by the fallen Empire. Sigourney Weaver joins the adventure as a New Republic figure who understands both Din's usefulness and his refusal to behave like a conventional soldier. At its best, the film remembers that Grogu is not simply a product designed to sell toys. His silence forces Din to interpret tiny expressions and movements, creating a parent-child relationship without ordinary conversation. Pedro Pascal's performance must communicate affection through posture, pauses, and a voice coming from behind a helmet. The major crowd-pleasing scene arrives during a collapsing confrontation, when Din appears trapped, and Grogu finally uses the Force with greater control than expected. The moment is visually impressive, but its emotional power comes from Din realizing that the child he protects is slowly becoming capable of protecting him. Worldwide earnings reached roughly $345 million against a reported production budget around $165 million. That total would be respectable for many movies. For the theatrical return of Star Wars, it was alarming. Once advertising, distribution, and theater shares were considered, the film struggled to produce the kind of profit expected from one of cinema's largest brands. Its domestic result of approximately $178 million placed it far below the franchise's historic peaks. Industry discussion suggested it could finish among the lowest-grossing live-action Star Wars theatrical releases, creating uncomfortable comparisons with Solo. Number 2. Supergirl, 2026. Kara Zor-El did not arrive on Earth as a baby. She remembers Krypton, remembers losing it, and understands exactly what was taken from her. That difference separates her from Superman and gives Supergirl its emotional foundation. Millie Alcock plays Kara as restless, angry, and uncomfortable with the expectations attached to her family symbol. Instead of behaving like a polished public hero, she travels through distant worlds, avoids responsibility, and attempts to outrun memories that follow her everywhere. Her journey changes when she meets a young survivor seeking justice against the space pirate Krem. What begins as a reluctant partnership becomes a cosmic pursuit. Kara sees her own grief reflected in the girl's determination, but she also recognizes how easily grief can become an identity. The mission forces her to decide whether justice means defeating an enemy or preventing another person from being consumed by revenge. One of the strongest scenes places Kara beneath a red sun, where her usual strength begins to disappear. The confrontation becomes slower, less graceful, and more desperate. Without easy power, she must continue because another person is watching her. Alcock's expression changes from anger to fear before finally settling into determination. It is the moment Kara stops behaving like someone borrowing a famous symbol and begins deciding what that symbol means to her. Audiences were somewhat warmer, yet that goodwill did not translate into enough tickets. Reports place the worldwide total near $125 million against a production cost around $170 million. Even before the full marketing expense was considered, the gap was severe. Several problems contributed. The DC brand was still being rebuilt. Some viewers were uncertain about how the story connected to the newest Superman continuity. Others saw a cosmic adventure filled with unfamiliar characters and decided to wait for streaming. The promotional campaign emphasized attitude and spectacle, but struggled to explain the grief driving Kara's behavior. The movie also refused to make its hero instantly lovable. Kara drinks, argues, makes selfish decisions, and occasionally resents the cousin who became Earth's perfect symbol while she carried memories he never had. Those qualities made marketing difficult, but they also make the character interesting. Supergirl is uneven. Certain digital environments feel unfinished, the middle section repeats information, and the villain never becomes as complex as the heroine. Yet Alcock gives the film a pulse. She makes Kara feel like someone living in the shadow of both a dead planet and a famous relative. Number 1. Masters of the Universe, 2026. For decades, Hollywood tried to return He-Man to the big screen. When the expensive new version finally arrived, the studio expected nostalgia, younger viewers, and franchise-hungry audiences to combine into a major global hit. Instead, Eternia became the location of one of 2026's most painful financial collapses. The story begins after Prince Adam has spent years separated from his home. Eternia has fallen under Skeletor's rule, and the people who once believed in Adam's family have been scattered or forced into submission. Returning does not immediately transform him into a hero. He is uncertain, disconnected from his history, and afraid that the legends surrounding the Sword of Power belong to someone stronger. Nicholas Galitzine plays Adam with more vulnerability than the advertising suggested. He is physically capable, but the film understands that muscles are not the same as purpose. Teela and Man-at-Arms must guide him through a world that continued suffering while he was gone. Their frustration creates an important question. Does Adam deserve to lead simply because of his birth? The first transformation is the sequence almost everyone remembers. Surrounded by Skeletor's forces, Adam raises the sword, but hesitates before speaking the familiar words. Images of his childhood, his missing family, and the people still resisting flash around him. When the power finally arrives, the moment is loud and unapologetically heroic. The costume, music, and visual effects briefly capture exactly why the character survived for generations. The adventure follows Adam, Teela, Man-at-Arms, and their allies as they attempt to break Skeletor's control. Familiar vehicles, creatures, fortresses, and supporting characters appear throughout the journey. Some introductions feel natural. Others clearly exist because the studio expected sequels, spin-offs, and an extended universe. Worldwide ticket sales remained around $114 million. The officially reported production cost was approximately $170 million, while other industry reports suggested the real figure may have exceeded $200 million before marketing. Under either calculation, the result was disastrous. The domestic total stayed below $65 million. Even strong audience reactions and curiosity surrounding the mid-credits appearance of She-Ra could not repair the opening. A sequel tease means very little when the first chapter cannot recover its own cost. Both sides had a point. So which flop deserves a second life, and which one should remain forgotten? Share your choice below, because box office numbers can measure attention, but they cannot always measure quality. These 18 movies prove that bad timing, weak marketing, and enormous budgets can bury a film before audiences decide for themselves. Like, share, and subscribe for more movie countdowns. And remember, sometimes Hollywood's most embarrassing failure becomes your next favorite movie.